You pair that big social problem with easy, widespread access to lethal weaponry, it's a big deal. The Rise of Lonely Single Men. This is by Greg Matos, PsyD, Dating Apps and a Drastically Changing Relationship Landscape. Dating opportunities for heterosexual men are diminishing as relationship standards rise. Men represent approximately 62% of dating app users, lowering their chances for matches. Wow, 62%. That makes so much sense. Men need to address skills deficits to meet healthier relationship expectations. Younger and middle-aged men are the loneliest they've ever been in generations, and it's probably going to get worse. This is not my typical rosy view of relationships, but a reality nonetheless. Over the last 30 years, men have become a larger portion of that growing group of long-term single people. Men use dating apps, but they make up 62% of users. That makes so much sense based on my experience on dating apps. Competition in online dating is fierce, and lucky in-person chance encounters with dreamy partners are rarer than ever. With so many options, it's not surprising that women are increasingly selective. I do a live TikTok show and speak with hundreds of audience members every week. I hear recurring dating themes from women between the ages of 25 and 45. They prefer men who are emotionally available, good communicators, share similar values. For men, that means a relationship skills gap that, if not addressed, will likely lead to fewer dating opportunities, less patience for poor communication skills, and longer periods of being single. The problem for men is that emotional connection is the lifeblood of healthy long-term love. Emotional connection requires all the skills that families are still not consistently teaching their young boys. How can men reap the benefit of algorithms? Level up your mental health game. That means getting into some individual therapy to address your skills gap. It means valuing your own internal world and respecting your ideas enough to communicate them effectively. It means intimacy, romance, and emotional connection as worthy of your time and effort. We have an opportunity to revolutionize romantic relationships and establish new healthy norms, starting with a first date. It's likely that some of these romances will be transformative and healing, disrupting generational trauma and establishing a fresh culture of admiration and validation. Men have a key role in this transformation, but only if they go all in. I actually did look at the study that he's referencing here. And while he focuses on men and that little write-up, I mean, it's really not looking good for any group. For most groups, alienation, feelings of loneliness are up. And also, that little study also underscores the partnership gap between Black women and women of other races. Black women are still, the only woman group, ethnicity, race that is less partnered than their male counterparts. So, there's that. It makes perfect sense to me that so many of these men are by themselves because they're just not willing to do what it takes. But I am also, like I said, Kimberly can't keep a man because Kimberly ain't trying to keep no man, I mean, I'm sure I could adjust and give in and let things go and keep a man around. I'm sure that I could do that. But why? What do I get from that? What you're offering is just not worth it for me. And I feel like a lot of women are just being like, what you're offering is just not enough. Like, it's the same thing with the last person I was talking to, where I felt like I was asking for stuff that was just obvious, and he felt like I was asking for the world, and we just never were able to get over that impasse. Okay. I hope this article was eye-opening for a lot of hetero men who love to put women down, for sure. I honestly think that we're at an impasse, particularly for men who consider themselves to be high value. I really think that what is happening is those men are coming to the table like, I'm enough. I don't need to change. I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to find somebody who's going to get on my program. And they might, especially if you're Black. And I think a lot of women obviously are saying, no, thanks. Not going to do that. Your program sucks. I have friends and I have family and I have hobbies and I have passions and I have a life outside of any romantic interest. So trying to conform to whatever you got going on is not attractive. And I'm not even sure if there's a real resolution for that. I don't think so. To be honest, this makes me a little nervous. Lonely men are madmen, and madmen, well, we know. Okay, this is a really good point. When we're talking about the loneliness epidemic, right, that's exploding in so many Western countries, we're not just talking about whether or not men and women get married or cohabitate and have sex and have children. We're actually talking about what does society look like. And it's, funny, haha, whatever. You guys are going to be old and alone and nobody's going to be visiting you at the home. We kind of laugh at that. But what do so many of the mass shooters in the United States have in common? When we're talking about violence, terrorism, what do so many of the men who perpetrate those acts of harm, what do they have in common? It's a deep hatred of women. It's the incel logic and ideology, feelings of loneliness and alienation. It's a big social problem. And so I don't believe that all of this violence is only about singularly white supremacy. If you look at Uvalde, for example, obviously white supremacy is, a thing, but certainly the ways that society is transforming and how men can't keep up is exacerbating problems that already existed. And so we have this problem. Yeah, I think loneliness is a problem that there's no end in sight for. There's no fix. We're not going to be forcing people to pair up, like Jordan Peterson said or whatever. We're not going to be coercing people into entering into monogamous relationships. No. And you pair that big social problem with easy, widespread access to lethal weaponry. It's a big deal. As a woman, it's like, okay, y'all niggas are lonely. Get your act together. But as a person who lives in the United States, who has many loved ones who live here, who lives in Texas, an open carry state, it's very scary.
Hey, you guys, when I was editing, I realized I have a lot more thoughts about why these kinds of social trends are so scary. It's because they do provide greater social and political support for the reversal of women's rights and the rights of anybody who has the capacity to bear children. One of the great things about the sexual revolution of the late 60s into the 70s and ultimately the legalization of abortion via Roe v. Wade in the United States is, before then, if you got pregnant, you were stuck, okay? You had to make it work with the person who impregnated you. You had to stay with your parents or get married or go off and hide. And of course, access to abortion, safe, legal abortion, that is, allows more people to get an abortion, terminate a pregnancy, and then resume their lives. You get more emotional mobility, physical mobility, socioeconomic mobility. Now it makes perfect sense that we would want to, and by we, I do mean the patriarchal, white supremacist, capitalist, imperialist powers that be. All of these institutions. Seeing how lonely and sad so many cisgender heterosexual men are, we would want to do whatever it takes to limit the mobility of women. We've already seen these stories come up about literal high schoolers, like literal children who get pregnant and instead of being able to get an abortion and go off to college, they're stuck with their teenage boyfriend. They have to get married or cohabitate because they literally not only physically cannot care for a child, they literally cannot afford to do it without having another breadwinner. I absolutely believe that all of these things are connected, and we're seeing this stuff happen in the United States because, girl, our institutions are just a mess. But I absolutely believe that all across the world, particularly in the West, we're gonna see similar regressive movement.
Do you think this is because of the explosion of the manosphere, making men think they can just show up and not put in any effort? No, I don't. I think that the manosphere is a product, but not the cause. I think that over the past 20 to 30 years, we have slowly seen the decline in marriage rates. A part of the decline in marriage rates is, if you read a book called The End of Men, that's just like the distillations of so much research over the past 20 years, and that because the structure of the economy is changing, men are not getting educated. They are not, increasingly, they don't have access to the high-paying jobs that would allow them to take care of a family, that would enable them to become a marriageable partner, right? Like an attractive partner. And so, you know, they're not getting married. And women are like, what are you bringing to the table? Oh, nothing? No, we can't get married. And then we have the rise of all of these new technologies that were supposed to bring us closer together, but actually, you know, in reality, only increase alienation. I've talked about the rise in sexlessness among young millennials and Gen Zers, and they're having less sex than older millennials and Gen Xers, less sex than their parents. And the rise of sexlessness is primarily concentrated in cisgender heterosexual men. Actually, young women are having sex. Oh yeah, they're having some kind of sexual experiences, but way more young women are having sex than young men. And so we have all of this stuff, right, coming together, and then we get all of these men saying that they are lonely.